Hey, uh, if I sound a little strained and aggravated, it's because this is the fourth time that I've recorded this. First time the computer quit on me, and the next two times the sound went haywire on me, and so here we go. We're looking at James chapter 4, and I'm going to limit this to just a couple of verses in James chapter 4 to verses 11 and 12, because he talks about an issue that I think is a very important issue for us, especially in our situation today, maybe all the time. I want to remind you about the situation that James is dealing with in his church there in what I think is Palestine shortly before the destruction of Jerusalem. The people there are oppressed. They're not wealthy at all. They're probably very poor. They're probably agricultural. And a couple or three things are happening to them. Number one, they're not getting paid. The rich people are allowing them to work or forcing them to work because probably these poor people are in debt, and then are refusing to pay them, and then are probably repossessing their own personal property in terms of the debt that they still owe. And so these folks are having a pretty bad time of it. It's just not working out the way that they thought it would work. And so a lot of them have turned to violence. I know we tend to take the first part of James chapter 4 where he talks about the wars and fights that happen among you, and we tend to want to try to kind of soften that up and just say they're disagreeing, they're yelling and arguing with one another. But I think they've come to blows, and they're even killing people that they disagree with. And so James is having to write to them to try to calm down a very delicate and a very violent situation. Of course, that's not our problem at all, but still, I think some of the issues that arise in that type of situation that would drive those people to such extreme behaviors are the same kinds of things that may be happening with us today. You know, our world is really out of control. And the longer this COVID-19 thing goes on, I begin to hear more and more people say more and more extreme things and act in extreme ways. And so, maybe we need to hear what James has to say to us in our own situation. I heard a story one time about a cranky grandpa who lay down to take a nap. His grandson snuck in. Liked to have a little fun with Grandpa, so he took some Limburger cheese and he rubbed it on the old man's mustache. Grandpa woke up with a snort, and he took one big sniff, and he said, "This room stinks." And he jumped to his feet and he ran into the other parts of the house, and everywhere he went in the house, he would take a whiff and say, "This whole house stinks." And so he ran outside. Warm sunshine, bright colors, clean air, birds singing. He took a whiff and he said, "The whole world stinks." You know, one of the problems that we run into when things start going sour for us, when life is not giving us what we expect, and when people aren't treating us the way that we want to be treated, when all sorts of negative things are happening, we get where we can't see anything but the bad. The whole world stinks. Everybody in the world stinks. All we can see are their mistakes, the things about them that irritate us, where they need to improve. And it's always their fault and not mine. It is so easy to get into that critical, criticizing mindset. John storms in from work, and he's been at work, and it's been a terrible day. On his way to work, he had a flat. He had to stop and fix the flat, which made him late to work. His boss met him at the door, chewing on him because he hadn't yet met this deadline that he was supposed to meet, and he's desperately trying to get all of his work done, and the phone keeps ringing with people wanting things that have nothing to do with anything. And he finally gets home after all of that pressure, schedule being interrupted, mounting all day, nothing gets done, and he goes home, and all he can see is that dinner isn't ready, that the children are too loud, that his wife won't shut up. Nothing pleases him because he's had a bad day. Mary watches the evening news, and there's just one disaster after another. Murders, rapes, wars, all of this disturbing information about the rise of COVID-19 and how we're going to have to quarantine a little longer and how people may have made this mistake or that mistake. And she turns on her teenage son, and his room is a mess. He can't cut his hair right. He doesn't comb his hair right. His friends aren't suitable. This is wrong. That is wrong. He can't do anything right. James said in James chapter 4, verses 11 and 12, "Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and to destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? As I said, the church is under stress. James has already said in James chapter 1, you're going through all sorts of trials. And I think they have turned critical. James uses rather strong words in these two verses. He uses the word slander, saying false things about other people. He has used the word judge, judging, condemning, looking at people with a critical eye. The world is working against them, and their anger and fear have turned inward. They have turned toward each other, and they can only see the failure in each other, the mistakes that other people make, the weaknesses that other people exhibit, or where someone doesn't measure up. And maybe it's even spread to their criticism of religious commitment and religious practice, where their faults have been magnified into these desperate issues of right and wrong and loyalty and faithfulness. And somebody didn't say something with the right tone of voice or with the right emphasis. I had a fellow tell me one time, he's begun to hear more heresy in what isn't said than in what is. And sometimes that's the way we get. We get so critical that we can't even hear what people are really saying or give them credit for saying something positive. All we can hear is negative and wrong and heresy. You can't win in a situation like that. You can never do enough to please a critic, mainly because he isn't focused on what you do right or what you do well. He is focused on what mistakes you make and what he can criticize and what he can pick out about your practice that he doesn't like. Jill tries to be quiet because she thinks her husband wants him to leave her alone or wants her to leave him alone. And her husband immediately says, "Well, you never talk to me. What are you pouting about?" And so she starts to talk and starts to tell him about her day. And he says, "Why do you always interrupt me when I'm right in a critical point of this football game? Why do you interrupt me when I'm always right in the middle of the best TV show I've ever seen?" And so she goes in the dining room to set the table, and his voice follows her in there as well. "Why are you slamming those dishes around in there?" I don't have to tell you that you never get anywhere by being a critic. No matter even if you are well-intentioned, critics are always surprised to find that their criticism is unwelcome. Their advice is unwelcome. Why are they so sensitive? I'm only trying to help. Critics only stir up hard feelings and fear, anger and frustration. James reveals in 3 very pithy statements why criticism fails. He says, number 1, criticism is immoral. Last part of verse 11, when you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. That is an immoral thing to do, to judge the law rather than to keep the law, to complain about the law or to condemn the law or to say what's wrong about the law. When you're criticized, do you feel accepted or rejected? When someone criticizes you, do you feel closer to the critic or do you feel farther away? Is your relationship strengthened or is a wall built? Now that's why that's why James says criticism is an immoral act. It's a violation of the law of love. The law for James is summed up in one statement. James 2 and verse 8, the royal law found in Scripture, love your neighbor as yourself. Now I know there's a prior law that's even more binding than that one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. But James is concerned about the essence of the way we treat one another according to the law. He is concerned about the situation that has arisen in that church. And so he's going to really see in the law that requirement, love your neighbor as yourself. And that law requires that we approach people in a positive way, that we find reasons to accept them, that we find reasons to forgive them, that we find ways to build relationships, to be positive and edifying rather than to be destructive. Criticism is immoral because its focus is to enumerate the reasons for rejecting another person, for flinging accusations instead of speaking words of forgiveness, for building walls rather than building relationships. Criticism is immoral. Secondly, criticism has about it an air of arrogance. James says in verse 12, first part of verse 12, there is only one lawgiver and judge who is able both to save and to destroy. He kind of leaves the question hanging there. Who made you God? Why do you think you're so good that you can tell everybody else how they need to improve or how they need to change? So there is that air of arrogance about criticism. And thirdly, criticism is hypocritical. Verse 12, last part of the verse, but you, who are you to judge your neighbor? Are you so perfect that you have the right to straighten me out? Are you so wise that you have the insight to be able to tell everybody else how they need to live their lives and what they need to do? Criticism is hypocritical, and James kind of exposes that hypocrisy that inhabits a lot of our lives, where we just know we could fix something, we could fix somebody else if they would just listen to us. Now, there is another side to this thing. There is kind of a positive side to this issue of criticizing. There are times when we need to point out sin in the lives of other people. We need to hold each other accountable. James chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. My brothers and sisters, if one of you should wander from the truth and someone should bring that person back, remember this: whoever turns a sinner from the error of their way will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins. Now, it is clear from what James says that there are times when we have to call attention to the failure in somebody else's lives. We have to point out that they're doing wrong and encourage them to correct it. But notice that he leaves that till the very last two verses of his letter. It's almost as though James is worried that people are not going to hear what he says when he says, look, do this in a positive, loving, caring way. And they're just going to hear, I need to be critical. I need to be angry. I need to shut these people out and shove them away. It's almost as though he is saying, you may be the one that needs to be turned away from the error of your ways. The question is, how can we confront? How can we hold each other accountable? How can we really help each other? How can we do that in a positive way? How can we do that in a way that builds up instead of tearing down? The first thing James recommends is learn to practice acceptance. Verse 11, brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. I hear in that a critic practicing rejection. And James is telling us we need to be careful about the way that we approach one another. The thing to do, instead of rejecting, is to accept, to practice acceptance, to let people know that you really love them. The English novelist Marian Evans, whom we know as George Eliot, wrote this: "Oh, the comfort, the inexpressible comfort of feeling safe with a person, having neither to weigh thought nor measure words, but to pour them all out just as it is, chaff and grain together, knowing that a faithful hand will take and sift them, keeping what is worth keeping, and then with the breath of kindness blow the rest away." You get there that sense of freedom, that sense of relaxation that comes with knowing that you can trust someone with your feelings and with your words. They will accept you, even if you don't say it exactly right, even if you're not exactly right. They're still going to love you and care for you. And so instead of putting the most negative spin they can on everything you say and do, they are trying to sift through and find your true intentions and find the true good you. Contrast that sense of relaxed freedom with the tension-filled air around a critic. I've got my eye on you. When you step out of line, I'm going to be right here to tell you about it. I'm going to straighten you out. There was a disturbance on the edge of the crowd. Angry voices as men pushed their way and shoved people out of the way. The crowd parts and a group of Pharisees burst through and they throw her to the ground in front of Jesus. She's clutching her clothes, clutching her loose clothing. She struggles to her feet, face red, eyes flashing defiance. She's just looking around like a cornered rabbit searching for a way to escape. And the leader grabs her arm, shakes her, shoves her towards Jesus. We caught her in the act of adultery. The law says stone her. What do you say? Jesus bends down and begins to write on the ground. Angry voices murmur for an answer, louder and louder, more and more insistent. And the woman's defiant eyes are twitching in fear. This crowd is working itself into a mob. They're almost ready to kill. And at the height of the frenzy, Jesus stands slowly, dusts his hands, looks into every eye. If any one of you is without sin, go ahead and throw the first stone. Then he squats and writes in the sand. Stunned into silence, the crowd slinks away until there is only the woman and Jesus left writing on the ground. Lost in her amazement, as she watches these Pharisees creep away down the street, trying to be unnoticed, she is startled by a voice. Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? With a note of wonder, she said, No one, sir. Then neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. And you know, I think she did. James says, learn to practice acceptance. He says, number 2, try love instead of anger. Last part of verse 11. When you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. I had there a little bit of resentment and anger because of God's desire that things be done a different way than what we feel like doing them, or what we would like to do. There was a time when she got frustrated with people. She would go out to her garden to hoe weeds, and every weed had a name, someone with whom she was angry. And she would mutilate those weeds, just chop them into tiny bits, hacking away until she stood there out of breath, heart pounding. I've changed all that, she said. I still name all the weeds, and yes, I name them the name of people who have made me angry. But instead of chopping them, she said, I gently pull them and pause to pray for each one of them before I lay it aside. She said, I call it the love approach rather than the angry approach. Paul puts it this way in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 4. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Try love instead of anger. Thirdly, James says, give up controlling. Verse 12, there is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. Now let me say that with a little bit different emphasis there. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. I think the most diehard assumption that we make in human existence is, I can make another person change. Wives think they can change their husbands. Husbands think they can change their wives. Parents think they can change their children. And it always begins with sweet talk. You know, with that smooth appeal, cajoling, trying to convince them that they need to change their behavior. And it evolves eventually into stern lectures and then finally into screaming fits. We cannot make other people change. Ken Voges and Ron Braun wrote a book called Understanding How Others Misunderstand You. Subtitle, A Unique and Proven Plan for Strengthening Personal Relationships. They say, too often we assume the responsibility for creating change in others, when in fact, true change can only come from within each individual. You cannot motivate other people. However, all people are motivated. People become motivated to action for their own reasons, not the reasons others have for them. The very best a motivator can do is to create the healthy environment that allows others to motivate themselves into action. Hear what they're saying. You cannot change another person. You cannot make another person change. They will only change when they decide to change. And the most you can do is to create an environment that helps them, a healthy environment that helps them as they try to make the right choices. I have always impressed with the story of the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15. Now I know the story of the prodigal son is a story. Jesus told it to illustrate a point, and he was not trying to lay out history. This is not something that actually happened. And oftentimes we get in trouble because we try to over-psychologize all the things that go on in the prodigal son. But there are a couple of things about that story that I find really remarkable. First of all, it is a remarkable story about God our Father, a father who is eager to accept his sinful son back home. But the most remarkable part about the story, I think, is that he let him go in the first place. He didn't ground him. He didn't send the police to go bring him home. He didn't send his friends to go seek him out and make him come home. He simply left the son out there, and the son was having this terrible time until the son decided for his own reasons that he wanted to come back home. And the father accepted him. That is, I think, of the perfect illustration of the idea that we have to give up trying to control other people. We cannot make people change because we criticize. We can only assist them as they decide to make changes. Finally, James says we have to earn the right to criticize. Last part of verse 12, but you, who are you to judge your neighbor? Stephen Covey, in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about an emotional bank account. Now, you've heard me talk about this before. An emotional bank account is a way of describing the trust that's built up in a relationship, the feeling of safeness that you have with another human being. When trust is high, the relationship is strong enough that it can take some negative things, that it is strong enough that your criticism of me can be effective. When trust is low, criticism is just destructive and offensive. Now, deposits are made in this emotional bank account through acts of courtesy, through kindness, through honesty, through keeping commitments. All of these positive interactions that we have build our trust and build it so that we can get through some fairly difficult times. Now, you have to be sure to keep a positive balance in your emotional bank account. You have to build trust before you can offer helpful critiques. You don't have the right to criticize simply because you're the boss, or you're the parent, or you're the spouse, or because you're the friend. You have to take the time, you have to expend the effort to build relationships, to perform acts that build trust, and to be sure to keep a balance, positive interactions in those emotional bank accounts, and keep them high. Because when I trust you, I'll listen to you. But trust isn't automatic. You have to build trust. So James says there are those 4 things that we need to work on, 4 things that we need in order to avoid criticism. We need to learn to practice acceptance. We need to try love instead of anger. We need to give up controlling. And we need to earn the right to criticize. Let's pray, please. Holy Father, we are so grateful to you for your love for us. You always accept us, and you're always willing to love us when we are even unlovable. And Father, Jesus Christ exhibited that same sense of acceptance and love, and I never hear a criticism on the lips of Jesus. I pray, Father, that you would be with us. I pray that you would shape us in your image. I pray that we would follow the example of Jesus Christ, that we would build up trust with one another, and Father, that we would always struggle and strive to build and never to tear down. And I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. Next week, we're going to look at the last part of James chapter 4, and I'll see you then.